Say, this is Todd Bensman. You're watching the Break It Down Show.
This is Todd Bensman, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it. First off, I got Patrick Richardson, who's never co-hosted before, and this is his actual inaugural visit to the show. So I appreciate Patrick for coming on and helping me out as I try to drive this plane. We've got Todd Bensman on as a guest. He's got a fantastic book. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But I also, not to be a downer to start the show, but one of the things I'm doing all week is talking about my brother who passed away on Thursday. We're raising funds for him through a GoFundMe to help his family through this time of crisis and trial and grief. So if you all are interested in helping, the best way to help is to contribute to his GoFundMe. We're working on all the other aspects of it. We're going to get through the grief. It was a shock for us, but we're going to be all right. My brother Eric was a good dude. I love him. I miss him. I'm even considering getting a tattoo, which is the thing I really have. So just my shout out at the show, top of the show for Eric and his family and my love for them and our sadness at my brother's passing. Okay, let's get into the topics here, Todd. I was just asking you off mic, and this is interesting. So what Todd does is Todd focuses on, I'm going to say the words immigration. But really, instead of thinking this like a Venn diagram, we need to think of it like an Euler diagram because there's immigration, there's trafficking, there's infiltration of the country, there's the border crisis, the capacity to deal with it. It gets really complicated. Can you sort of help us understand and use your experience to kind of drive that narrative so we understand the bigger picture of what we're trying to do as a nation with our access to our nation?
I guess the quickest and easiest way to describe what that issue is, that big, broad, multifaceted issue, is that border security is national security. Not to cite a cliche, but I mean, it's literally true because you can segment the border into lots of different issues. There's drug trafficking as its own issue. You have the DEA, you have agencies that just deal with the drug trafficking part and big sections of other agencies. There is a sex trafficking trade that goes on as well. There's human smuggling, which is different than sex trafficking. It's just the movement of illegal immigrants over the border who just want to live here and work illegally. And then you have national security matters as well, where you have people coming from places like Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan over that border, and we don't know who they are. And so there's this whole other section of the Homeland Security establishment that has to deal with that. So it's really border security is national security, and I mean that in the whole of government way. All of our different agencies, including our military and their intelligence services and the Coast Guard and all the different branches are down south and at the border. It's really all-encompassing, I guess, is what you could say. I mean, lately we're just talking about illegal immigration, but it's really about much more than that.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town, Dodge City, Kansas, and that strikes me because currently that Dodge City, Garden City liberal triad, meatpacking triad in Southwest Kansas is something like 57% Hispanic, which okay, fine, but it has brought with it huge gang problems. It's somewhat more under control now, but at one point, Los Norteños out of Northern California more or less ran Dodge City, and it took a RICO case. So the feds finally stopped in, but people, they think about the border in terms of Texas, but it's a small town in Kansas is not equipped to handle what comes with that. So I guess how do we get across to people that this is not just the border, this is not just Texas, this is not just New Mexico, this isn't just the governor of Texas' problem.
I mean, I think it just needs to be messaged and spoken of constantly to remind people that your neighbor died of a fentanyl overdose from a drug that came smuggled over the Mexican border. There are thousands and thousands of fentanyl overdose deaths right now. That drug comes in over the Mexican border, and it doesn't take much of it at all. We have drug trafficking slayings in Chicago, in Indiana, and New York, and across the country. Cartel operatives who work the drug trade here with transnational groups that accept the drugs and then distribute it on the streets. Everything, or not everything, but a great many of our national ills are traced right back to this border, directly to this border. When they say Texas often says, Texas security is national security, that actually is true. Most of every terrible thing that comes in over the border is coming in through Texas, or the majority of it. But the people are coming in too. And there are labor market issues associated with that. There are victims in American society, Black and Latino and uneducated strata of the American society, that are completely nailed by all of this influx of low-skilled, low-educated immigrants coming into the country. They're out of a job. Taxpayers are generally impacted by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are coming in and making claims for food stamps and subsidized housing and different kinds of welfare benefits that they're eligible for. Schools. We have to, by law, educate every child who knocks on the door of a public school. And so somebody's got to buy the big portable classrooms that go on the back 40 of the school property, and the ESL teachers, and all of the overcrowding from that, and the school lunches. And, border security is national security. Not to repeat that tired phrase too much, but it's so true.
Let me ask you this, as we kind of illustrate this Euler diagram. 10 years ago or so, our opiate crisis was different, and we started denying people access to opiates through doctors. We started, coding pills to try to limit the ability to abuse the drug. But that just leads to demand for something else, which leads to a demand for fentanyl, which has to get in some way. And I'm just supposing here, right? So that creates this demand for fentanyl. Fentanyl's significantly more dangerous. Prince is dead in part due to fentanyl. Tom Petty is dead due in part to fentanyl. I mean, this is hitting people all over the place. Is it fair to say that our drug policies also impact this border, this national security problem that you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, the drug problem is what Homeland Security people, professionals, often call a wicked problem. Wicked problems are those kinds of problems that you're lucky if you can just manage them, so that they don't spin out of control, but you can never really find all of the different combinations of solutions that are necessary to actually defeat and vanquish the problem. And drug trafficking is certainly one of those. It's not just the Mexican cartels, it's us. We are demanding those drugs, and we are willing to pay top dollar for those drugs to come over the border. So it's us too. But that doesn't mean that a society can't decide to manage a certain evil or a certain ill, knowing that you're never going to be able to vanquish it. You can make it so that it doesn't overwhelm your society and break it down and destroy you. Great example, I've mentioned this a few times, is child pedophilia type stuff. You're just never, those guys are hardwired. You're just never going to get rid of all of them, but you can manage them, with high prison sentences, and with, watching your children and who comes into your family and all of those kinds of things, education. And we're never going to get rid of that problem, but we're still going to put those guys in jail for as long as we possibly can. And we should. And that keeps a lid on things, we hope. Same with drugs or any of these other problems that we just decide we're going to attack.
One of the so I got a chance to go down to Texas along the border, and though my vice president wouldn't do it, I went to Del Rio, Texas. I know you've been there. I talked to Judge Owens because he runs the response, and he's sort of the go-to guy. And when he explained a couple of things within his Euler diagram, like within his circle, it's like, one, I've got to get these people across my border, and it's like, by the way, I'm a liberal, but I voted for Donald Trump because his border policies worked better, and enabled me to do my job. And he's like, look, I'm all pro-immigrant. I want the, and I say this too, the best American's the next one. We want people to come in here. But he's like, but I'm not being provisioned. And because of the political layering and goals of people above him, Governor Abbott specifically, he wants Joe Biden to fail with immigration. So you have all these problems. 47, when I talked to him, 47 different nations, the people's origins coming in across his border. Trying to keep up with the testing, and not just COVID, everybody, TB testing and on and on and on. All these things that require resources. We need you to stay for 2 days until your TB test comes back. All of this stuff, our immigration policy or lack of a coherent thing, and its schizophrenic nature of going left and right, it seems to create a massive industry, billions of dollars trying to get things across our borders. I guess two-part question. One, is any other nation as problematic as us in terms of immigration and demand and, the human trafficking, drug trafficking? Is anybody else as bad at this as us? And the other thing is there a way to have a comprehensive policy to deal with immigration and everything else where we don't cause more harm than good? Because, look, we only worry about the border and maybe the invisible people that are in the country. We don't think about anything else that is a result of our policies outside of our borders.
Right, man. Those are big, good questions.
That's what we do around here.
Yeah. Hey, you have another segment, but listen, the baseline, I guess, the ground truth is that the world has developed into haves and have-nots. For better or worse. And the United States is among the Western countries that have systems and governance in place to sire healthy economic activity over the generations that built wealth. And we have systems that don't exist anywhere else in the country. And so people who are from poor countries are going to make their way to the rich countries. I don't begrudge any of those people for, especially like Haitians, for wanting to get out of that place and go to a place like this where you can get 24-hour all-you-can-eat Chinese food. So I get that. But the problem is that if you are one of the destination countries, like the United States is most definitely a destination country. You mentioned people are coming from 42 other countries. It's actually more like 140 other countries, but that's okay. And those people have to cross really long, vast distances, usually through 10 other countries before they get here. And they're not interested in staying in any of those other 10 countries. Even though those 10 countries, a lot of them are a lot better than the ones that they're coming from. They're going to the best one, the richest one, and the one that offers the most prospects for economic activity, right? The economic success. That's really what it's all about. But countries that where we have a citizenry here, and the citizenry is allowed to decide who gets to come in and then how many. And we've done that. Our country has laws. We have caps. We have checks and balances where we have decided on these sets of rules and what's legal and what's not. And that is just sovereignty. That's the function of that. That's what countries do. They assert sovereign right to decide who gets to come in, for example, or who to attack with the military, or, all of these kinds of questions. And when you have mass illegal immigration and you allow it, you cede to that, what you're doing is you're saying that our systems don't count. They don't matter. They don't have credibility or authenticity. And the second you start to do that is when the breakdown happens in your society. You have to abide by your laws. And to me, it's a matter of sovereignty that you have an administration that's in there. The first time I've ever seen anything like this, by the way, where they have purposefully and glibly cast aside all of the laws and just said, everybody who can get here gets in. We don't care about any of the laws or anything. We're inviting you in. We're going to let you in because we're that way. We're cool. And in the history of the world, I'm unaware of any other country that has taken a position like that. I don't know. And I mean, horizontally across nations in the world today, and nation states, city states, but vertically across history, all the way to ancient times, I'm unaware of any nation state or group of people that called themselves a country that just said everybody can come in who wants to come in. So we're in a weird place in the world as a country that's just fine with, like, who cares about who comes in? Everybody can come in. If you can get here, you're in. That's very weird. It's very weird.
Well, a nation without borders is not a nation. I mean, that's axiomatic. Another question that's a little off the border, but still on illegal immigration. One of the arguments is that, well, the biggest problem is visa overstayers. I question that. I really do. But given the trouble that we have with China right now, and what is, if we're not very careful, is coming with China, and the number of visa overstayers that are Chinese students, what do we need? I'm not really sure. I know this is a real problem, and I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get both sides of this?
Right. I mean, it's true that a very significant volume of the illegal population in the United States were visa overstayers. They came in on short-term visas. It could be like a student visa or a work visa of some sort, or a scholarly visa, a scholar visa, or whatever, or a tourist visa. And, they just blow it off and stay and say, come hunt me down, knowing that there are too many of them to hunt down. You're a needle in the haystack with pretty good odds that nobody's going to come hunt you down, which is the game. And we have had lots of opportunity in this country to install technology and systems that would just take care of that quickly. The entry-exit visa system, which was mandated by Congress in 2003 in one of the big pieces of legislation that came out of 9/11, and was recommended by the 9/11 Commission report, and everybody agreed there was a great idea, but they just simply didn't do it. Nobody did it. They blew it off. And when you know how many people are coming in, but not whether those same people left, that means that you don't even know your baseline, who's here, who didn't leave. You don't know who didn't leave. And if you don't know who didn't leave, you can't even target to go after them and find them. You don't have a name. You don't know if somebody left or not in a dedicated technological way where you get flagged. Oh, so-and-so is in the red. He was supposed to leave on March 1st and it's March 9th and he didn't leave. So I don't have an answer for that. These are just failures by Congress and failures by the agencies of Congress. Some of it is politically motivated. There are reasons why that doesn't happen. Recently, if I just have a second, I'm going to try to make this simple, but we've had a lot of cases of Chinese. You mentioned the Chinese of J and F visa holders from China. These are people who are coming in as students and scholars, or student exchange, cultural exchange, and they usually come in and they embed with UCLA or MIT or one of our top universities, but they're spies, and they were just filching all of our stuff and shipping it straight over to the Chinese consulate in New York or LA or wherever they were, Boston, stealing and stealing and stealing. And so the Trump administration put in a rules change that would require Chinese, all F and J visa holders, including from Middle Eastern countries, to like every 2 years check in with an immigration official and show that you're still in status and in compliance with all the agreements that you made when you got that thing, and let somebody do an eyeball to eyeball interview with you. And it was a great piece of rulemaking by the Trump administration that would address the Chinese spy problem and also address the terrorism problem. And the Biden administration came in, took one look at it, and killed it. It was just short of success. It was almost done, and they just killed it. Why did they kill it? The Chinese government wanted it killed because it gets in the way of espionage.
There is the opposite would not be true there. When we try to do intelligence gathering in China, boy, I tell you what, they kick us out of country, and if only that. Our counterintelligence
we're just idiots in this country. I mean, I don't mean to just get based like that. I mean that's idiotic to just kill a piece of rulemaking.
I'm a counterintelligence guy by training in the Army, and let me tell you right now, this is for everybody else. I know Todd probably knows this already. We open a counterintelligence investigation in the United States against China every day, every single day. It's like every 18 to 20 hours, depends on who's briefing you. 18 to 20 hours. Anytime something is sent from there in terms of our electric grid, those like the DOE counterintelligence people are like, let's go through this thing with the fine tooth comb, make sure there's not some kind of attack being perpetrated through the electronic and electric system. I mean, this is nonstop, and if it's every day, you don't have enough agents to chase all these things down, and we're not catching even 10% of what's flowing in. So it's an enormous problem.
No, I mean, and part of it is that we're supposed to be doing thorough security vetting, that we improved all these processes after 9/11, but we haven't. There's just everybody slips in anyway. I'm doing a project right now on security vetting, and I've got all these cases, and I'm doing all this research, and find that I was very surprised to come across all of these war criminal cases. Guys coming in from El Salvador who threw women and children down the well and then fired the guns and dropped grenades in after them, just came into the United States and were able to just live here for years, decades under their own names, even though their names were online with their photos. And Ethiopians who were doing torture operations in the late 70s with something called the Red Terror, just lied their way in, and they got asylum, and they're just living, and nobody asked any questions, and they get away with it for years and years and years, even after 9/11. And I'm watching and studying all these things and just kind of scratching my head that we're still there.
Another question I have, and this is kind of back to law enforcement and the border. The cartels have really solid ties with the Albanian mafia, and the Albanians are controlling human trafficking pretty much worldwide, from what I hear. And a lot of the sex trafficking across our border is ending up, the Albanians are the ones in the interior moving. What are we doing? I mean, is Congress aware of this? Law enforcement clearly is, obviously is. I know that the Albanians are very hard to infiltrate because it's all family and clan based. But why is none of this getting through to the public conscience? Well, why is nobody aware of this? Why is this stuff not being reported? And why is Congress not moving on this?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not a huge expert on sex trafficking and human trafficking, but I know enough about it. And I was in law enforcement for almost a decade on the intelligence side in Texas. So I just through osmosis kind of pick up on things. But I mean, there is an awareness in law enforcement, like you said. There are dedicated teams that work on that, that try to penetrate the organizations that are moving these women through, that try to arrest the pimps and the Johns and the people that are on the demand side. And there is an effort to even a public awareness campaign. You can see posters in certain areas of, in Asian sections of Houston, for example, that have phone numbers where, if you're in trouble, call this number. If you are tracked, call this number, say something to somebody. Health care officials are trained to ask women now, do you need help? Do we need to get you out of a situation? So, I mean, we have made strides in that, but it's one of those wicked problems. It just is that you're just never going to quite vanquish. I don't mean to be, not be optimistic about that, but I do think that we're working on it. That the people that are supposed to be working on it are working on it. I've seen movies about it, made for TV movies. I mean, it's out there, it is out there. I don't think it can ever be out there enough. If you know anything about it, it's just got to be about the worst scourge on the planet. I mean, it's slavery. It's, it's a terrible kind of slavery that it's in all of our major cities. It's happening in Houston and Dallas and Chicago and LA and everywhere. But, I think we need to manage it down, and you can't talk about it enough. Maybe like we are here. Every little bit helps.
It's such a big, like you said, it's wicked problems all intermeshed, because we're about to go in a completely different direction here as we go into this next part of the show. But it's amazing how complex this is, and how it appears, from my point of view, neither right nor left has an answer for these things. It's just turn the dial to the left, turn the dial to the right, and good luck, And one of the things Judge Owens complained about was like, I'm a liberal. I want immigrants to come in. Can we have some sanity in this system? And he was saying, I get these guys and I shoot them over to San Antonio as fast as I can, and the judge there gets pissed at me. And if I was that judge, I'd be pissed at me too. He's like, but I got to get him out of here. So I make him their problem, because they're and this for anybody else who doesn't know, Texas is enormous. So San Antonio is nowhere near Del Rio. It's hours and hours away. And it's the only thing that's even kind of close. So here's the thing I wanted to ask you about. Everybody should go by America's Covert Border War, the untold story of the nation's battle to prevent jihadist infiltration. We've not even got to the jihadist part. We're about to get into this. My buddy Ali, he's been posting. He's a friend of mine. He's in Iraq, and he's desperate to come here, but he's trying to do it the right way, get a visa and all those kind of things. Let's talk about what it means to get here. If you had nefarious intent and you wanted to get trained up in Bagram Airfield and get to the United States, what does that look like cost-wise, logistics-wise, for someone to get from there to Del Rio, Texas, and be let in as a person of color?
Yeah, not a big deal. If you've got money, you can travel, as they say. If you're talking about coming in over the border illegally and taking advantage of our broken asylum system, that's the way to do it. not a big deal. If you're from Iraq, you can hire a smuggler. There are lots of facilitators in the region there who know how to get you to Russia and then on an airplane, and then Russia flying to Havana. And Havana's kind of off the grid for us. And then from Havana, you can fly into Mexico City or maybe Brazil or anywhere in any place in Latin America that you can get a visa to, or Ecuador. You didn't even need a visa for a long time, up until very, very recently. And then there's all kinds of smugglers on the ground around the airports and bus stations. Go find one, pay them a little bit of money, and next thing you know, you're traveling through Panama, Costa Rica, and all the way up, usually by bus or taxi. Sometimes you can catch a flight between countries if you've got the money. And then you're, over the border and you're saying, I declare asylum. And once you say those magic words, if Trump's not in office anyway, we'll let you in and you can live for 4 years during the backlog. And if you don't get your asylum, if you don't win your asylum case, come and get me for another 20 years.
Right. And then
and that's how it works.
What does this cost though? Like if I was to try to get here through any one of the different, lines and access points, is it 10,000? Is it $1 million? What is it?
It ranges. I just wrote a story, a big piece about a State Department reward. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I just put that up at our CIS website, and I published it on Town Hall Media under my name. You can find it, Todd Bensman at Town Hall Media, and you can find it there. State Department puts out a $2 million reward for the arrest of a Pakistani human smuggler who's indicted but in absentia. So he's on the loose. He's a fugitive. And this guy specializes in moving Afghans from Afghanistan and Pakistan to Texas. That's his thing. He charges them $20,000 for that trip. Worth it if you can get in, because you're going to earn, wages, dollar wages, and you're going to pay it back to whoever lent you the money or however you got the money. But the way that one works is, he provides them with passports that are stolen or belong to other people, and fix them up and buy visas through corrupt officials, flies them into Brazil, from Brazil, Colombia, overland, and then Colombia right on up to Panama and up through to the southern border. This guy's been doing that for 6 years straight. They put a reward out for him because he's moving people of national security concern, people who are coming from, Taliban territory and ISIS territory, Al-Qaeda territory, and they're worried about it right now because of all the Afghan refugees who have flooded Pakistan after the fall of Kabul. So they put a $2 million reward out for this guy's arrest. That's how scared they are, even the Biden administration, and how real they think. That's real money for a real problem, about what's going to happen. But that's a $20,000 trip. You can do it for $5,000. I've interviewed lots of migrants that have spent, $3,000, $4,000 on self-propelled guided trips. You can do it with smugglers. There's a whole range. During the Syrian civil war, we would have wealthy Syrians. Remember, Trump put a cap on. Hang on just a second. Trump put a cap on Syrian visas into the country, and instead of taking advantage of these visas or trying to get a visa or waiting for one, they just came over the border, and they had $100,000, and they would just be first class trips on Israeli passports or stolen passports that were provided to them in 5-star hotels with a nice 2-week vacation in Cancun, Mexico. And then when they got all rested up from that in an air-conditioned private limo to the California border and dropped off, and I declare asylum. And every one of them are in. All of them got in under that asylum system. So if you've got the money, you can travel over the border. I've written about my expectation that we will see a lot of Afghans start to cross our southern border in the next, over the next year.
And if you're in a position where you're in Pakistan and you're trying to get your family out, you become very exploitable. If you have no money, especially, and it's like, yeah, we'll get you across. Here's the cost, and it's a son. It's someone willing to strap a bomb on at the Westfield Mall, because there's Westfield malls everywhere around the nation. The other question I wanted to, because you write some really great stuff. It's hard to believe, but yeah, it's true. Talk about the embassies across the world that grant visas, and just how we picture Marines and big block buildings, all these things. But what does an embassy look like in other countries, and just how permeable is that barrier as well?
Did you read my book? I think you did, or you must have seen something I wrote about it. But yeah, I have a chapter in the book, America's Covert Border War, about these Latin American embassies that are in countries like Syria and Iraq and Lebanon. Mexico's got a huge embassy in Lebanon, for example. So it has been implicated in lots of scandals by personnel in the Mexican embassy that just sells real Mexican passports for $10,000. They can get their hands on it. And so the embassies of Latin American countries in places where people of terrorism concern can just buy or pay their way into a visa or an actual passport, and then use those to cross into our hemisphere and then go over the border. And so, there are certain consulates that are especially problematic over there. For example, Belize, you wouldn't think, but Belize has been implicated. They've got embassies in Singapore and in the Middle East and all over the, I guess you would call it South Asia, India, and that sort of thing. And people know that you can go there and get a Belize visa for fairly cheap and easy, and they don't ask too many questions. And next thing you know, you're flying into Belize City. You can find, in addition to Mexico and Belize, Bolivia, their embassies all over Latin America. The Cubans are the worst. Cubans have these consulate offices all over the place, and they don't even care. You don't even have to bribe anybody. They'll give you a transit visa for $50. In Syria, the Venezuelans have an embassy in Syria. Years ago, I was there and visited it, and they had a line. I was in Damascus. They had a line out the door and halfway down the street, offering 9 different kinds of visas to anybody who just, made a claim of that they had business and that they were going to come back to Syria. And so it's a real problem. And the smugglers, guys like Khan, the one who's got a $2 million reward out on his head right now, they have relationships with people in these particular Latin American embassies, and they buy and bribe visas and passports out of there. So it's a real problem, and it's not a very recognized one. I dedicate a whole chapter of my book to that particular problem, and I pretty much say that this is a diplomatic solution and a CIA operation waiting to happen.
Yeah, it's shocking. Go ahead, Pat.
I just was going to say, it seems like there's just a level of sheer incompetence from top to bottom, from the border to the embassies to just security in general, and politically a comprehensive solution. And I really hate that term is, that's never going to happen.
No, I don't think so. Not
and
now.
I have long advocated, as a libertarian leading conservative, I've said for a long time, look, let's get control of the border. Let's do that first. And then we can talk about the people that are here. Let's get the border under control. Then we'll talk about the people who are here. We can talk about amnesty or pathway to citizenship or whatever you want, but let's get control of the border first. Is there any chance that we can? I guess it's a two-part question. Number one, is this incompetence, particularly under this administration, deliberate, or is it just sheer incompetence? And the second part is there any chance that maybe we can do this piecemeal in a way that makes sense? Let's get, find the parts that we can agree on and get those done, and then we can worry about the other stuff later.
Oh man, those are two huge questions. I'll just get to the easy, simple one first. Is it incompetence or deliberate? And I believe after watching this particular border crisis unfold from the beginning, I predicted it would happen in multiple editorial pieces. I knew this was going to happen. It was obvious that it was going to happen. I'd been interviewing immigrants way down in deep Mexico and in Guatemala, 8-9 months before the election, and you could see it gathering. They were getting ready for a Democrat. So I think that it's deliberate by this particular administration. They absolutely know what they did, and they did it on purpose. They knew that what they were going to do on purpose was going to have this result. Everybody told them it. You don't even have to be brilliant. I like to say I point to these columns that I wrote and say, I predicted this, but that didn't take any brilliant prognostication or special anything. It was totally obvious that the things that they were saying out loud that they were going to do when they got into office was being heard by the immigrants. They heard all that stuff about amnesty and about how they were going to get rid of all the Trump stuff and that they were welcoming and that those things were cruel and we were going to get rid of deportation. Deportation is bad, and if they started coming, of course they did. I would. And they told me, migrants told me that they were coming for that reason. So nobody was ever hiding it. The bigger question is, why would they deliberately do that? Because, no prior you've had crises like these come up in the past, but even Democratic administrations were opposed to them and would do everything they could to tamp them down and get it under control, at least to where it was. The Obama administration famously tamped down an unaccompanied migrant crisis in 2014 by repatriating them all the way back to the Central American countries where they came from. And once everybody saw that was happening, they were like, oh, we better not bother. It's expensive. And it's a sunk cost if we get sent back. And Obama's flying us all home. They called Obama the deporter in chief. But this administration is the first one that I am aware of in the history of the country that is knowingly, purposefully, and very calculatedly doing this and allowing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to be rewarded instantly when they get to the border, which just sends the signal, along with selfies of people in Indiana. I made it. Here's my new apartment, to cause an escalation of other people wanting to get in too and take advantage. It's so obvious. I think that the reason I have lots of theories, the most popular one is, the Democrats are doing this on purpose because they're importing a whole new generation of Democratic voters and they'll be able to retain power forever. I'm not giving them credit for that kind of long-term thinking. Most politicians are just looking at the next election. Nobody's thinking that far in away. And my theory is that the progressive left of the Democratic Party has really gotten powerful in the last cycle. And the Bernie Sanders people, that block, and it's very, very potent. And they've taken a lot of influence on the White House. And that block of the Democratic Party, which holds so much sway, wants unmitigated, uncontrolled, open borders. That's what they want. They say it. They think that it's inhumane to have borders and to say no to poor people who are coming across. And part of that is maybe a little bit of virtue signaling of like how unracist we are and how racist you are if you want to stop it. And the Biden administration is under their sway. That's my theory.
I want to take that right there, what you just said, because the racial part of this thing is it's pudding headed. When we say things like people of color, it ignores the entire world. If I was to take a snapshot of the prototypical person from every country, you wouldn't be able to identify what their ethnicity was. And I say this all the time, but I met a white dude from Turkey who was as black as can be, clearly not a white person, and yet he said, I'm white. And that, because Turkey's a weird place like that. There's all kinds of ethnicities melded together. And so you can say people of color. Fact is, Syrians are Caucasians. I mean, by academic definition. So when we look at the racial part of it, it's dumb because America seems to think it's black and white and then other. But that other is the entire world. What kind of black are we talking about? What kind of ethnicity? Who are these people? We can't even have these conversations. It's a fact. Lebanese people are Asians, right? They're from Asia, but we can't even. It blows our minds to talk about that. So let's get over the race conversation because it doesn't make any sense. And just for the record, for anybody watching, I love a very liberal. I'm saying liberal in the classic sense. Immigration policy. I want people to come here, and if you want to leave your country to take your shot in mine, well, come on, let's do it. But let's have some kind of sanity. Let's make sure that you're provided for. It's going to be hard for a generation, maybe two, to get your legs underneath you, but you can absolutely do it. But we can't do this thing where we ignore all of the threats. Calling Donald Trump's, and I'm not a Trump fan, it's for everybody to know, calling his ban a Muslim ban or an Islamic ban was stupid. These were countries that were targeted because of the actions of people in those countries, not because of their religion. So we have to, at some point, balance out the threat with the people that want to come here. And I want a lot of people to come here. I want them to make it so that we can handle what's coming in. We can't it's inhumane to let people come in and suffer and put Americans through any kind of extra stress. Texas, the border of Texas is not a safe place for Texans. That's inhumane because they actually are from this country. Come on, but let's figure out how to process this thing.
Well, I got to agree with you. There's places in Dodge City, Kansas to this day that it is not safe to go after dark in a town of 30,000.
Yeah.
And it's because of the border crisis. This is ridiculous. And it's all because, this current one in part is because we don't like mean tweet guy.
Right. Well, look, the way I look at it is I make a very, in my mind, there is a significant distinction, like a Grand Canyon distinction. Stand by. Sorry.
You're fine.
Between legal and illegal immigration. And if you are going to accept and allow mass illegal immigration, then you are telling the people that do it legally that, why did you bother? You went through all these hoops, you waited, you bided your time, you were respectful of our laws. And ultimately, these people who did it illegally got the same benefit quicker, faster, and easier and cheaper than you did. And so it's not fair and it's not right. There's no justice in undermining your legal process and your laws, your national laws and your sovereignty, because there's a cute kid coming on illegally, and the kid's cute, and you can't say no, right? But if you want to come in, and if you're of the belief that more is merrier, go through the legal way. If you think that the legal way is too narrow, then there is a process in this country legislatively to have a debate about what's too many and what's not enough. Have the debate, pass the law, make the changes that make more people, that allow more people to come in legally. But to conflate immigration, a lot of people just say, oh, you're against immigration. You're either for immigration or you're against immigration. But that's a terrible framing. It needs to be that I am for legal immigration and I am not for illegal immigration, because it corrupts the whole legal part of it that we did. So I just want to point out that there is a big difference between illegal and legal, and breaking the laws and abiding by the laws and being respectful. To me, the people that are just rushing in over the border, they're not even that desperate. The Haitians, a lot of people will say, wow, those Haitians, man, if they would do what they did that long trip, they must really be in a terrible state. But that's just a complete lie. None of that's true. All of those Haitians were living prosperous, secure lives in Chile for years and years. They just saw an opportunity to get in and upgrade their situation. So if you don't even pay attention to, and they crossed 5 other countries to get here, there was no desperation whatsoever among those Haitians in Del Rio. They had bank accounts, they had cell phones, they had clothing and food, and were able to buy supplies and everything else. They were not coming from earthquake wrecked Haiti or from a presidential assassination or anything like that. They hadn't been there in years. So you have to have the facts too. People were coming here because I can do better. I was doing well, but now I can do more well.
Yeah.
And I find
one of the things.
Go ahead.
One of the things Judge Owen says too is same thing you're saying. It's like when I means like the system, when the system says, hey, people on this side of the bridge, we're not going to feed you. You know what they do? They go into town on Mexico side and they get food because that's where they are, and they have money to do that, and they're not starving. So these folks do have, not all of them, but many of these folks have enough money to provision themselves, and we can't forget that. A question from my brother-in-law Steve. He wants to know if you're going to have your book out in audio form. That's the kind of book reader he is audio style.
I don't know. That's a publisher decision. I'll ask. I don't know. I mean, maybe. Well, I would like it to be out in audio. I've listened to audiobooks.
Yeah. For a second there, you were looking around at your desk. I thought maybe you're going to hold up the cassette tape and be like, be ready, it's coming. Pat, I cut you off. Yet. Please.
No, it's all right. I just was going to say, I find the whole, well, you're against immigration for myself particularly offensive, because I have several friends that are, Americans born in another country. My friend Sarah Hoyt often says that she was born an American, just not in the right place. And I have a son-in-law that's from Coventry, England. So, this idea that, if you are against illegal immigration, you must be against all immigrants, is really offensive when you have one in your family. So, and I guess getting back to my earlier question, so I think everybody agrees that the immigration, at least everybody sane, agrees that the immigration system is broken. The comprehensive, that's just not going to happen. Comprehensive reform, and I really hate that term because it's omnibus crap that gets, everybody just starts throwing stuff at the wall, and it's either bloated and never does what it's supposed to do, or it just doesn't happen. There are places where Democrats and Republicans can agree. Is there any way that we're going to be able to get some piecemeal stuff done here, at least make some reform to try and fix this? I'll agree that we need more people. I'll agree that we need more visas. I can agree with all of that, that the quotas are too low, maybe. I'm at least willing to talk about it, but it just seems that everybody wants to do this omnibus instead of let's find the places we can agree and let's get those things done, and then we can work on the other stuff later.
I'm not optimistic right now about any kind of even piecemeal. Maybe one of the parties might be able to push something through piecemeal, but the Congress is just too divided. It's too partisan over every issue of it. Every piece of the comprehensive reform, the package has its own pros and cons and interest groups on both sides of it. It's just too divisive right now. I mean, once upon a time, it wasn't that long ago that both chambers of Congress approved the Fence Act, the 2006 National Secure Fence Act, which authorized the construction of a whole bunch of fence walls on the border. That was bipartisan, man. And I think Biden voted for that at the time. But we have moved to too divisive a place, I think. And what we'll see in the midterms, probably, it usually happens this way, that the Republicans will probably take control of the Senate and the House this time, and there'll be an executive, and they'll just be at loggerheads again. And we just keep doing this. We might get the White House and both chambers, but there's not enough power in having the both chambers to override the opposition and the oppositionist activity that goes on. And so we just can't go anywhere with this. I think 2007 was the last time that we really had a chance at comprehensive immigration reform. And I mean, you saw what happened. The whole thing just blew up in partisanship even then.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, we got to get past the partisan problem to get anything done. I mean, Congress, and the longer that Congress can't sort things out, the more the executive branch is taking power and through executive orders, and that's not
exactly. Exactly. All immigration related policy now runs right up to the White House, and they've got the lever, and you either more or less. That's about all you can do with these different kinds of tweakings of executive authority. I mean, I think what really wrecked everything was the 1986 amnesty bill, which everybody approved, and you know, one side just backstabbed the other side in the end, and forever broke the trust. I mean, you know, they did an amnesty on the provision that they would do enforcement afterwards and clean everything up. And they just did the amnesty and blew off the enforcement part, just blew it all off. And, you know, just it's never been the same. People still say, God, what about that? You know, you want to do an amnesty is always a part of every one of these packages. And you'll never get past that history of where the Democrats backstabbed the Republicans on all of that.
No. And I think to some degree justifiably. I mean, as I recall, there was supposed to be huge fines to employers who employ illegals. Which
none of that happened.
Yeah, which actually would. I've advocated that for a long time because it would actually fix the problem. You know, if an employer gets $1 million fine for every illegal that he employs, he's going to stop employing illegals. If there's no jobs, they're going to stop coming. I mean, it's very simple. It's very
if there's someone to go knock on doors and give them that ticket, though. And not just the willingness, but the capacity to send people out to go fix that problem. I mean, again, you can gamble. Either way, I don't want to this topic is so huge, Todd, and I appreciate you coming on and just dealing with it. And again, it's this Euler diagram of nonsense of threat and immigration and oh my God, this and that. So it's if no one else tells you this, man, thank you for illustrating these things. It's not easy to do what you do, and we need so much more of this so we can understand just how much harm we cause externally, internally, because we can't figure We can't figure this out. And there truly is this covert war going on. Anything in closing for us?
I mean, really, I think that
All right.
the most pressing issue right now is this out of control crisis at the border, which is just this story out today in the Washington Post, saying 1.7 million immigrants were apprehended illegally entering at the southern border, which puts us over the most in U.S. history for a single year. I mean, think about that for a minute. 1.7 million people. I mean, there are a lot of American cities that aren't that big. And that many people came in a single year. It works out to about, picture a football stadium of 50,000 people. That's like 1 week of entries. 1 week. And then 4 of those in a month, 200,000. And then month after month after month after month. I mean, it's astounding what's happening at the southern border. It's astounding. Nothing like it in history. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of people think that that's bad, but there's a lot of other people, maybe half the country, that just doesn't care. They're like perfectly fine with, a city 1.5 million crossing the border every year for the next 4 years or 3 years. So, the country really has to grapple with this kind of a thing, because it will change the country. It will have a lot of secondary impacts and consequences across the country for years and years and years. These people are permanent. We're never going to deport even a fraction of these people. They're not even trying to deport any of them. There is a moratorium on deportations in the interior right now. Nobody's getting deported, and it's an open border, essentially.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Stand by. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.